Hi everyone, it's Nathan. Welcome back to the Record Lab podcast. I'm a songwriter, music producer, and audio engineer from Toronto, Canada. Before we dive into the episode, I just want to make it clear that this is being recorded on a completely different day. When I had originally recorded this episode, the camera was being so wacky. It was like turning off, it was changing settings, it was being just fucking weird. So unfortunately, my footage is not the greatest in this episode. It is laggy, it is like cutting in and out. The video for our guest is completely fine and the audio is perfect. It's just my end is just like so dog shit. But at around like I think the 40-50 minute mark, it really starts to pick back up and it's better, it's clear, it's focused. So if you want to skip to then, that's totally fine. But honestly, the conversation is great from beginning to end. So I would definitely stick around for that. With all that being said, I'd love to welcome our guest to the podcast. He is a songwriter, music producer, and mixing and mastering engineer from Los Angeles, California. He's been in the industry now for the past 10 years, working a lot in the experimental alternative pop genre. He works a lot with artists similar to Billie Eilish, Rosalia, FKA Twigs, and Frank Ocean. Our guest is very passionate about collaborating with artists and helping them bring their vision to life with music. And he's also worked with a lot of different labels over the years, including Capitol, Def Jam, and Republic. With all that being said, I would love to welcome to the Record Lab podcast, Quiet Sun.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, why don't you kind of take us back to like a little bit of your background with music and like how you got into it? Like, did you listen to music growing up or how did you kind of get involved in that?
Yeah, it's funny. Growing up, like my first memories of music were that I absolutely hated it. Like,
oh wow,
was not a music fan when I was really little. So my first experiences with music were growing up in church and being in the church choir from like a very young age, like cherub choir at like 3 or 4 years old. You're kind of just shouting. But I just remember like my whole framework was music was like a very like boring, dry, religious kind of thing. And, you know, of course I heard pop music. I wasn't like sheltered or anything. Like my dad listened to The Doors. My mom listened to like a lot of Judy Collins and Joni Mitchell and things like that. So they were definitely music lovers, but I always perceived it as something that was kind of boring. And then my sister, who is 8 or 9 years older than me, gave me a CD by The Offspring, a CD by Dr. Dre, and a CD by Eminem. And from that point on, I was just hooked. I got into Hendrix. I got into all sorts of different artists. You know, really just took to it pretty quickly. And it was like all I wanted to do. So by the time I was a senior in high school, we had to do a senior project. And I was just like raring to get to something music related. And I ended up interning at a record studio that I found was just kind of, you know, 5 minutes away from my parents' house growing up. So I interned there. I was a runner. I was oiling cables, but, you know, at the same time learning like, how do you record? What's it like being in a room with a band that has different personalities? And what does an engineer do? What does a producer do? So I kind of cut my teeth there. And then when I went to school, I just happened to be lucky that my small liberal arts school opened up a recording and engineering program while I was there. So I quickly ditched my business major and jumped at the chance to do that. And then I moved to New York, was working as a producer and was also working at a record label at the time. And then moved to LA a couple of years ago during the pandemic. A lot of the artists I was working with ended up out here or were encouraging me to come out here. And so, yeah, took the plunge and I've been, haven't looked back ever since.
Wow. No, that's awesome. So you started interning at that record studio, like right out of high school or?
Yeah, well, I was actually still in high school. So the way it worked was...
That's awesome.
It was cool. A really cool program. Like you could do it for anything. You know, some kids in my class did like, they worked at like an urgent care or something in the medical field.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like a little bit of like a co-op then?
Yeah. Kind of like you basically like the school is when you're a second semester senior, they were like, we want to get you some kind of like jobs training. Like you go out in the world and like understand what it means to work. And so you could choose anything you wanted. You have to obviously get the position with the job. So, you know, I happened to reach out to a record studio because I was also really fortunate that my school had a really robust music program and a teacher who taught some basic recording. Like we were in GarageBand and things like that. But other kids did other things. Like some people did other arts stuff for their projects. Worked at a bank or something. So that just happened to be what I did. And I interned there for that semester. And then I went to college right after.
Oh, that's awesome. I wish I was like involved in music like I am now back then. Cause it's funny because as you were saying that, like I did a co-op too, but at the time I wanted to be like a chef. So I did mine at a restaurant instead. So I worked at a restaurant, but I never would have thought like music wise too. Like that's definitely a possibility. And where were you, if you don't mind me asking, like where was that like growing up city wise?
Yeah. I grew up right outside of Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
So I definitely had, like, growing up with that proximity to a big city, like I had a lot of exposure to the arts, and
Yeah.
Philly is low key just such a great music town. So I don't think it gets the props it deserves.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely have to look into more artists from there or like songs created there because that sounds really cool. Yeah. So you started off or you then moved to New York, worked there for a little bit and then moved to LA, like pandemic?
Yeah, 2020, the beginning of 2022. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how do you like LA for the music scene?
I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
It's especially after the pandemic. I think I became a little disillusioned with the New York scene. It's still great. You know, New York is still one of the best music cities in the world. But I think for what I wanted to do, which is working more so with like pop artists or bands that are kind of pushing the limits a little bit, LA was really just the place to be. There are so many artists here of all sorts of different genres. There's songwriters. Like I feel that the industry at all levels is more established here than in New York, although there is still of course a huge music scene there. But you know, I was going and playing tons of shows at different venues in New York, and you definitely get a variety. But I think with LA, what I've noticed is you have a lot of people who are very, very much focused on being artists. You have people who are very much focused on being writers, producers. So I think you get that stratification of specialties, and then everybody is just here to work. Like I very rarely find somebody who is not super, super focused on what they want to do.
Yeah. Like, you know, I came to LA for the first time back in September, and that's kind of like one of my first thoughts I had with that was that everybody in the city is like wants it and they work for it as well. It's not like, oh, this is just like something I do on the side. It's like, no, this is like their goal, and then they make that happen. And I really appreciate that like initiative and that drive that they have in that city.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that was your experience. And, you know, it was really cool working together when you were here. I think it's also the kind of thing where everybody respects what everybody else is doing, right? I mean, not everybody, of course, that's a generalization, but I think for the most part, people take you at face value. If I go to somebody and say like, hey, I'm a music producer and I'm a mixing engineer, they're like, great, that's awesome. What do you work on? You know, and I think sometimes in New York, and my fiance is an artist as well, we talk about this a lot, although she's an actor, so it's slightly different because they have unions and things. But I think a lot of the times in other cities, you get like, I'm an artist or I'm a producer, and they're like, great, what's your day job? You know, and that doesn't always feel so great. But and so, you know, so I think here it's really like you're taking it face value, and that's very freeing as a creative.
Hey, so my next question for you then would be, when making a record, what do you find yourself the most enjoyable? Like, what do you like to do the most? Is it writing? Is it recording, mixing, mastering? Kind of like walk us through how you got into each of those elements.
Yeah, it's kind of all of it. I mean, that's why I do as much as I do. And, you know, the industry is kind of coming together in a way where like a lot of people wear multiple hats now. I think that's kind of the role a producer has. You're doing a little engineering, you're doing a little recording, you're doing a little writing. But, you know, I always wrote my own songs growing up, but I was really more focused on sounds. Like, I think for me, it was always the exploration of what capabilities something had sonically. Like, my first musical memory that I remember having a lot of joy with was like pulling out pots and pans when I was really little and just like hitting them with stuff and just being fascinated by like the sound of it. And so I think for me, like the most exciting part is like that moment where all of the sonic stuff just comes together in that way that really gives you that incredible feeling. But I know that part of that is like you have to have a good song. So the writing is really important. So I got into that just by listening to and writing my own music. I got into engineering kind of by just necessity. Like when you go to audio engineering school, it's just like it's in the name. So you do learn how to record, you learn the scientific principles of it. I was lucky to have a teacher who also taught us the artistic principles of recording. And then producing was really like the amalgamation of all of that, where I was like, I can do all of these things. I don't have to choose, and I get to work with artists. Like, sign me up, you know? So for me, it was really just like finding something that really spoke to me in a way of I get to wear multiple hats and I never get bored of it. I think that's the most exciting part is like I enjoy working on all sorts of different things because I kind of have musical ADHD. I'm just, I'm fascinated by everything.
Yeah, no, I'm the exact same way. And I find some other people I've talked to as well with the engineering side of things, it's almost like you get into that, like you said, because it's a necessity, like you have to learn it because it's part of most like curriculums if you go to school and it's a very important part of it. But once you start learning it, you start getting so invested in it because it's like, oh, this is actually really interesting. Yeah. And the more you get into it, you develop that artistic side of it where you're using techniques in certain ways that are also creative. It's not just a simple, I'm going to EQ it like this because that's what the book says. It's like, no, I'm EQing it like this because my specific artistic choice is to do it like that. And that's going to create a completely different effect depending on the genre, which I find is really overlooked in engineering.
I mean, I agree with you completely. And I think that I also struggle to sometimes get out of the scientific approach, but that's something I think everybody goes through when you learn recording. And I tell artists all the time, like sometimes artists will, especially in the first call I have with them, a lot of times I hear, well, I'm not a producer. I don't know all the technical stuff. I don't really know what I'm doing. And I always tell people like everybody is a producer in some sense, because especially as an artist, you have a particular perspective on what you want your art to be. And you might not know like the technical terms. Like I want, my EQ notched at, 300K because that's where my voice is boomy, right? That's what we're here for. But you do know that when it sounds wrong and you do know when it sounds right.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I always tell people like everybody is a producer because you have that sound in your head and maybe you aren't able to get there on your own, but you still have that perspective. And I see my role as a producer as like, how do I draw that out of you, even if you don't necessarily have the technical language for it? And I think that's just having a basic respect for the artist too.
Yeah, 1,000%. I've talked about that so many times. It's like building chemistry with an artist is so important and it helps the collaboration process become so much easier too, because once you're comfortable with the artist and they're comfortable with you, ideas are able just to bounce off each other so fast and in a way where it's going to make a better product, because vulnerability is something that's so important too when it comes to like making songs and stuff. And if an artist feels comfortable enough with you to be vulnerable, then the better the song's going to be, I think.
1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the toughest thing is getting an artist to let their guard down a little bit in terms of we all, I think it's a natural thing as an artist in any medium to have some level of awareness that like you're being perceived and letting go of that perfectionism, letting down the guard of like, I know I'm going to be perceived for what I'm doing and I'm putting it out there. That in itself is a courageous act. And I always try to remind artists of that. I'm like, what you're doing is really like brave and scary and it's going to be okay, And if sometimes like the technical aspect of it too, kind of to your point is like, we can always get another take,
Yeah.
But I think establishing that rapport of like, this is a space where you can be free to create and not judge it's the hardest thing, but it's also simultaneously the most rewarding.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think it should always be like a safe space for an artist to come in and be able to trust either the producer or the engineer that they're there to make their song sound great. And they're putting their best foot forward for the artist to help create something that everyone in the end is really proud of and proud of sharing.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of that is just really, some of it's just being a good hang, like being somebody you can talk to, shoot the shit with a little bit, just be able to talk to. And I think it's a skill as a producer to kind of understand personality management too.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with a band, it's like you got 3, 4, 5 people, you're all having different perspectives and personalities. So it's like, how do I make this a seamless process for everybody and make everybody's voice heard? But at the same time, it's equally as important, to me at least, if you have, let's say, a pop artist and they have 2 writers in the room with them, and then I'm producing and maybe their manager or A&R or somebody is in there, everybody's voice needs to have a place, but it's also like helping the artist focus on what voices to listen to, how to respect everybody in the room and not shut anybody out. And I think it goes a long way when you can establish rapport with the artist in pre-production as well.
Yeah, for sure. Because I'm even thinking about to the sessions we had when I was in Toronto and then I contacted you on Instagram And it's like from then and there, like we had a phone call, we talked about it. It was great. Then like months down the line, we started having conversations on Instagram before I even came up to LA. And then even when I was in LA on the first day, I swear we spent like the first like hour just like talking and getting to know each other's styles and stuff before we actually started making something, which I think is really important too, because it's like you want to be able to be comfortable with the person, like I said, and in order to make something good.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I'm glad you feel that way because that's how I remember it too. It was a very like fun, seamless process. And I think that, you know, I just like relating to people, and this music is a community driven thing for me. But at the same time, it's also, I really like to hear from the artist, makes them tick, and what their music is about and their background, because all of that informs the production choices. It also informs how I kind of move through the session. Like if I notice an artist might be a little bit more sensitive to feedback, I'm going to, you know, change up how I deliver that feedback. Always being honest and direct, but it's also like, you know, you could blow up a session, and I've seen it happen where somebody gives direct feedback to somebody and it didn't land the right way. And maybe it wasn't even intentional, but it's just like, all right, now the energy is off and we kind of have to take a step back and redirect. And it can be a challenge, but I find it so much fun.
Yeah. I guess my next question for you is like, why don't you take us through like a day in your life working as a producer?
Sure. I tend to wake up pretty early I would say for a producer. I'm usually up by like 7 o'clock, and I like to kind of just start my day as a normal kind of day and make some breakfast and hang out with my fiance, get some me time. I like to read a lot in the morning. This is not necessarily music related, but I do think it's about kind of getting my mind right for the day and having some time for myself before I start any kind of creative work. And lately I've been reading a lot of music related stuff, which has been really nice. I'm kind of on a kick of like, I just finished a book about Glenn Johns. I'm reading a book about Rick Rubin right now. Just kind of going back to like being a student.
Yeah, I think I have that Rick Rubin book somewhere. Someone gave me like the PDF file that I still have to read about. But yeah, I should definitely check that out.
It's great. I mean, even for non-creatives, I think it's great as just like daily kind of meditations. I like to prioritize getting some me time first, because then the days that I don't, I'm really just struggling because I put so much of myself into producing things for artists that I work with. I'm like, I need to kind of be centered. So I also meditate, things like that. And then usually, you know, I'm jumping in and try to get all of my mixing work done first. Because to me, if I have mixing work at that time, I know that like if I spend all day listening to music and then I try to go into mixing something towards the end of the day, I'm just off because your ears are dead and you're making different choices and overcompensating. So I usually start with mixing work. Then I'll tend to get back to some people on emails. I like to jump into creative stuff first while I'm really like fresh ticking. That kind of morning creativity is really nice for me. I'm not a night owl. I have to be like doing stuff in the morning. You know, get back to people, and then I'm jumping into production, usually a session in the afternoon, or if I don't have a session that day, I am just going in and like working on tracks that are in process and sending things out to artists, getting their feedback. Usually lunchtime, I'll take like a call with an artist who's looking to work with me, or, you know, get back to some people over email again, and then, you know, wrapping up the day with more production stuff. It's, I try to keep it fluid, but I also try to keep things like kind of chunked out so I don't go crazy. Otherwise, I feel like everything kind of just comes to me versus me structuring my day. And that's the hardest thing, I think, about being a producer is it's, unless you're working for a production house or you're in a studio, like there's no one there to tell you how to structure your day. And there's no one there to give you the feedback of like you're running behind or you need to move a little quicker. It's kind of your own pace, which can be really tough as far as like managing your schedule, but at the same time, really freeing. And the only other thing would be like, occasionally, you know, there are days that I have blocked out to go into the studio to record with different artists, or, you know, maybe I'm working on my own thing because I do have an artist project. Like I'll record with a couple of other producers that I work with. And so, really just segmenting out those days and weeks to optimize how I can be creative.
No, that's very interesting. Just curious, because I know you said you outsource to some studios and stuff. Like when you work with other artists, do they typically come to you in your home studio, or do you rent out a studio and go to it?
It depends on what the artist wants to do. I mean, I have a home studio so that artists can come here, and I try to keep it a very like comfortable creative space. And I do tracking sessions here, but my preference is always to go to the studio because I feel like that's you get just the best recording. I like working with vocal engineers because it frees the artist up to just perform. It frees me up to just produce. I don't have to worry about engineering and the technical side of things. I can really just focus on listening, being attuned to where the artist is that day. And I think sometimes it's a little hard if you're engineering. Like you kind of have to kind of play both sides of that, where it's like I'm focused on the technical thing, but then I'm also focused on the artist's performance. And so I really enjoy working with engineers, and I guess to use your phrase, like outsourcing that work is nice when I can do it. And then there's just the magic of being in the studio. Like there's a certain, I think there's just a certain energy when you go to the studio where you can kind of shut the world out. And I find artists get just kind of like a boost from being there most of the time.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause just being in, like you said, like that environment too, like everyone's there to be creative. And then like, it's also aware that everyone's there to be creative. So it helps. Everyone's just like pitching in and something. I've had some really good studio sessions where it's like, everything feels like it's kind of just like falling into place, which is such a good feeling when you end up with like a record that's done. And then it's like, you remember, oh yeah, we were writing this part and that. And then like we recorded it and then that take didn't work. And just all like the fun little elements that actually went into it is such a good experience. I think that sometimes like when you are just writing at home, like let's say I'm writing a song on guitar and stuff, like, yeah, that was my writing experience compared to writing in a studio with a bunch of other people and like creating a cool track. Like, I think that's a really special moment.
You're so right. And I agree with you. And like, there's nothing better in this industry than like when you get to the end of the session and you hit that final playback and everybody is like, that's it. Those last 6 hours. Yeah. It's like those last 6 hours were totally worth it. Maybe there were some frustrating moments you had to work through, but I think that's like the really cool part of it. You just get to sit back and be like, damn, we all made that. And that's a hit. Makes you feel something,
That makes me want to get in the studio right now. I'm like, I want to go make something.
Yeah, man, come back to LA.
Yeah, seriously. Things are a little tricky there right now, but it's definitely still on my list for the end of the year.
Fair enough.
Yeah, right after I came back, I was like, I want to go back. And then I learned about like visas and everything. I'm like, that's really complicated. And now it's like even more complicated, but definitely still like on my list because I definitely want to come back and collaborate more with people and definitely like network more and start working there too a little bit as like an engineer. Because that's honestly been like my main thing right now is like engineering. I love doing it. And especially like mixing wise too. I feel like I've gotten a lot better with my mixes. So I want to start working with other artists rather than like just make music like for myself. Like I want to really focus on being like the producer of it all.
Yeah. And that's a big step, and I've having been through that myself, it's cool. It's really fun. Like I think that you absolutely should be doing that if that's something that lights you up, because there's also something really cool about like helping somebody achieve their vision and like that wow factor of like, man, we created this together and you just had this piano track and you couldn't picture anything beyond that. And then all of a sudden it's like this fully formed song.
Yeah.
And
like
that's
full production, full drums, full everything. And it's mixed and mastered. It's like, it's a really cool feeling.
It's so rewarding. And I think like for someone like me where I listen to and enjoy so much different genres of music, so many different genres that like I can't put that all into my own music. So being able to like do a little something different on each record and kind of flex those creative muscles differently each time is really cool. I also find that one of the most rewarding things. So highly encourage you to do that.
Yeah. To kind of like tie into what you just said with that about like the genres you work in and the different types of music you make. Cause I know you work a lot in like the alternative pop, like experimental pop genre, but I've noticed you have like a couple Spanish like records as well. So like, can you kind of take us through some of those and how those came to be?
Yeah. I think you're probably referring to some work I've done with an artist named Sofia La Fuente. She's just super talented writer, super talented artist and singer. And I was connected to her through a production company that I do work for called Grassfed. She was at the time a developing artist with them, and they linked us for some sessions. And she actually linked me with a couple of the other producers I work with now. So, one of the vocal engineers I mentioned before. And, with her, she sings in Spanish and English, but with two of the songs we worked on together, it was really Spanish focused. We had a session where we were just kind of messing around on the guitar, like figuring out some different kind of like cinematic dream pop focused kind of vibes. And that song was really cool because it went through a bunch of different versions. It started out as more of like an acoustic ballad. Then it became this like dream pop kind of song. We had actually finished most of the production, tracked it. It was in mixing, and she came back to me and the vocal engineer and was just like, there's something missing with this, something I want to push a little further. And I think she was in Miami at the time, and she called me and this other producer, Sal, who co-produced the record with me and one other guy, Danny, and was like, can you guys just link and see what you guys can come up with? And we ended up doing another version of that track, and didn't quite work. It was a little too busy. And at the end of the day, we kind of all split up, did a bunch of different things and sent them to each other and kind of combined them in a really cool way. And that ended up being a song called Un Hombre, which I'm really proud of. It was a really cool team effort to like be a part of. And it was my first Spanish language record. And that was a really, really fun thing to be a part of. And it got into a bunch of the like, new indie Latin playlists on Spotify. And it did great. I'm very proud of that record.
Yeah, I just listened to that song a couple of days ago to bring up on the podcast. And it's very well done. Because even me, like I don't speak Spanish at all, but it's a great song. And that's how I feel like it's a great song if you're able to like vibe with it and move with it. Even though I don't know what she's singing, but I'm like, just her voice and the production and everything about it, the melodies, like it's a really good song. And I think you guys did a great job on that one.
Thanks. Yeah. And honestly, that's a cool thing about music because it's its own language. And, I've showed that song to people and I think they get it because they get the feeling. The performance is so good. The writing is so good. When you understand the lyrics, the song is fantastic. But I think people that's what I'm always going for. And I think that's such a great example of like, you don't even need to understand what's being said. You just need to understand the feeling and you need to be moved by it. Yeah.
Yeah, the feeling's definitely important too. And I think you guys really captured that with the production as well. Because it's like, you can tell it's like a dreamy song and like the way she's singing with the melodies, like they just complement each other so well. And I think it was a really good song.
Thanks. Credit where credit is due. Sal and Danny also took that to a really special place in the production as well.
Yeah, that's cool that you were saying too, that you guys really focused on the production, and I went through many different like changes and many different versions and stuff. Because I've had songs too where it's like I had a full song with production done on it, and it just something about it wasn't sitting right with me. Take it a year later, and I made a beat, trying to write to the beat, and then I tried the song from a year ago on it. And I'm like, this is perfect, and I couldn't see it any other way. And like I was able to switch up some lyrics to make it work better. And now that's one of my songs, Complicated, that's out now. But it's really cool seeing a song like kind of the evolution of it. Like it started way back when, wrote it about this situation, made a production to it, sat on it for a bit, and then a year and a half later, I'm changing it up and I'm almost retelling the story of where I'm sitting on it now in my life.
That's so cool.
Yeah, like I love seeing song evolutions of how they start and how they grow into something that everyone's like really proud of.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's just about trusting your gut and also trusting your taste. I think as an artist, but this applies to producers and engineers, mixing engineers, like whatever part of the process you're in, like, when it's right. It kind of goes back to what I was saying before about everybody's a producer, but I think it really boils down to that feeling of like, when it's right, when it's not right. And trusting that gut is so important because it's so easy to, I don't know. I've definitely had songs where I've written it and stepped away and been like, yeah, it's missing something, and just went with it anyway. And that's really dissatisfying. And I've learned lessons with that too, where like sometimes it is better to wait. We get excited to finish something, but sometimes it's the song wants to be something that we don't quite know what it is yet. And you kind of got to work. It's as much working with the song as it is working with like the artist or yourself as the artist or the engineer. Like the song is its own kind of living, breathing entity.
Yeah, I've talked about this too with some other people. It's like sometimes even like when it comes to songwriting, and it's like when you're trying to force writing out and like force yourself to write something, it kind of feels like a little bit like less authentic because then you're not drawing from experience. And one of the main ways I find I get out of that myself is going out and experiencing things in life and then coming back to it later and being like, you got to go live a little before trying to put all your focus into one thing and trying to make it perfect and stuff. It's like, take a break and then go do some stuff, go have fun, come back, then visit it. And guaranteed your mind's going to be so much more clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes all you need is just take a walk and be alone with your thoughts, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I find writing comes a lot easier for me personally that way too, is just when I can't write anything, go out, go learn something new. Like that's honestly how I got into production a little bit too, is like I felt I couldn't write at all. So I'm like, why don't I try upping my game, making beats and stuff? And then I started really spending time doing that. Then when it came back to writing, I was like, wait a minute, learning like arrangement and learning different things that go into production are going to help me create better melodies, better lyrics and everything. So that's definitely something I think some people should know.
Yeah, totally. 100% agree with you.
Yeah. And also like it helps your skills. Like it helps you just gain more skills in general too, which I think is cool. Especially if you like making music, then it's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah. And I agree with you. It's like music is cool because you can do it all by yourself if you want to. And if you feel so inclined, but then you can bring people in to work on things with you. But I always tell artists too, I'm like, I want artists to be as empowered as possible. And if that means like the artist learns to be a like incredible producer themselves, hell yeah. Like, and I think, you know, from our sessions, like you are also a really talented producer, a really talented engineer. Yeah. On top of being a great artist and songwriter. So I don't approach that with scarcity. I approach that with like encouragement because I'm not worried about, you know, if an artist can go produce their own thing, like that's awesome. And when they want to bring me in, that's extra awesome. But at the same time, it makes, I think, the session so much easier because we, you know, can be even more collaborative. Like if you know how to produce and you know a little bit more about what you're doing on the console, I think it makes it easier for the artist to communicate what they want. It makes it easier for me to understand. It makes it so sometimes it's like you don't even have to talk. It's just like, hey, can you cue that up? And then they kind of know what you're going for and you kind of know what they're going for. And for me, I think that's, it's all about artist empowerment, like being able to feed that production, as you're saying, back into your songwriting and vice versa. Like they all inform each other.
Yeah. I think that's because I find a lot of artists nowadays too are kind of learning how to record themselves as well. And I think that's like, it's cool seeing artists take initiative in that way because it shows that they're really dedicated to the art that they're making and they want to learn how it's all done too, which I think is really cool, especially because I've seen a lot of artists now will like, they'll comp their own takes at home and then send them back to a producer to like mix in and like do all that stuff.
Yeah. I do that all the time with artists I work with. Like a lot of artists I work with have great home recording setups now and it's awesome. You know, I think being in the studio, as we talked about, is incredible, but there are plenty of artists who are like, maybe this song doesn't fit a studio environment. Maybe I just need to be in my bedroom singing by myself. Maybe I talked to an artist yesterday who was like, yeah, I just recorded this whole EP in my girlfriend's car and it sounds incredible. And I'm like,
wow,
you clearly had something there that helped you heighten your performance. Like any ability for an artist to empower themselves that way is just incredible in my mind. And the flexibility we have with remote recording and at-home studio technology now, like it just makes everybody better. It makes things more accessible, democratizes the industry in a way that I think previous generations didn't have access to. So, you know, some 17-year-old kid in Philadelphia can learn how to make a beat on his computer and, you know, work with anybody across the world. I think that's really, really cool.
Honestly, yeah. Like that's how I got into production too, is like, because it's so accessible now. It's like everyone makes music on their laptop. And I think that's cool. And like you said, it's like, I think it's something in the industry that's like becoming a little bit more known and it's like a new type of thing. It's because I find sometimes engineering can be like a little outdated, like techniques and what you're told to do and what you're told to not do. It's like times are changing and things are becoming so much easier to do, which I think it's good because it's letting people embrace their creativity more.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's like, anybody who's telling you there's rules, like, you can get out of here with that, in my opinion. Like, there are no rules.
Yeah.
There's principles. There's principles of recording. There's the hard science of how do you get the best recording. But like sometimes the best recording for the record is like you're taking a crappy microphone and just screaming in it, and that just gives you the vibe, and there's no compression on it whatsoever, and there's no EQ, and it's just raw, and that's what the record needs. I think you're talking about that sea change. Like there's plenty of, I don't want to just say it's the old guard. I'm sure there's plenty of people in our generation who kind of think this way too, but it's just, for me, it's like, it's what the record needs, not necessarily what the best, most scientifically accurate or like pristine recording you can get. But sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need that pristine recording, and you got to know how to do that. But you also got to know how to break that as well.
Yeah, because like you said too, also learning how to break the rules kind of helps with that the creative side of engineering as well. It's like, what if I don't do it like this? What if I break the rules and try it this way? And sometimes that's how you unlock really cool like production tricks, engineering techniques that are going to help like increase the quality of your record so much more too, by not listening to the rules and like thinking outside the box and trying new things.
Yeah. And embracing accidents. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've flown a vocal to the wrong place. Actually, the song we were talking about earlier, Un Hombre, I flew an entire section of chorus vocals past the end of the track. And that ended up being the a cappella section of the end of that song, where the entire song drops out.
Wow.
And it's just this beautiful layered harmonic section of a cappella vocals that ends the song in such a powerful way. And like, had I not embraced that accident and just deleted those and put them back where they should have been, like, I don't know, the end of that record would have been much different. And I think not as impactful. So I think it's like embracing accidents is really cool.
I guess another question I had for you about a record of yours called In Median. Can you kind of take us through the concept of how that started and then how you ended up writing the songs and producing them and how it ended up in your head to like where it is now?
Yeah, I was working on that project for 3 or 4 years. That project to me is very special because it was really about this journey of really getting to know myself and face some things that I had been struggling with. It's a love album to myself. It's a love album to my partner and my family. And in many ways, it is very dark, but it's also very uplifting. And the way I tried to structure it was almost like you're going through a journey with this character through the kind of undefined, unnamed character through the series of songs where they are really just churning emotionally inside, and through the love that they have for their partner, through their family, they find that kind of way out and through themselves and able to really connect more deeply. And I write a lot about religion and my experiences with religion and how that has kind of shaped my conception of myself and things I've struggled with that in terms of my relationship to myself and my own emotions sometimes and my own ability to really get deep down into things sometimes. And so that project, a certain song that speaks to that called Varnish, that is really about like, really it's, I think it was trying to speak to masculinity more than anything. But the masculinity that really hurts us and can hurt those around us in terms of not being able to face yourself and walking around with this shell, the varnish that you put over yourself, I think sometimes that doesn't really let your emotions out in a healthy way or doesn't really allow emotions to come in a healthy way. And there's another song called Exist Eternal that's just a straight up love song. But I always like writing love songs with a twist where it's not just I love you, but it's something, in this case, speaking to a higher power. For me, it was, I don't necessarily believe in a higher power, but I think something exists. And through the love I have for my partner, really like making me want to believe in an afterlife because I want that to be there for them, you know? And in the case of the project, it's like, maybe I never wanted that for myself, but in meeting somebody that you love so much, you want to believe in an afterlife. But then there's also another song about someone in my family passing away and how I kind of moved through the grief of that. And it's towards the end of the album. And I think that's important because for me, it's really speaking to like the feeling of moving on and keeping the memory of somebody alive is a way that you find yourself. And you kind of honor people through continuing to move forward through grief. So that's like the writing part of it. I think that it covers a range of topics, but the through line is finding yourself and honoring those around you through honoring yourself. The recording process was like very DIY. I recorded everything between New York and LA, and it was all like my production with a couple of exceptions. I wrote every song on it with the exception of 2. I brought in co-writers. I really just wanted to explore this like hazy dream pop, like kind of sound, but also something really euphoric, like lo-fi, but euphoric, and like combining a bunch of different types of different vibes that at one side sounded really sad and like heavy, but kind of expand into these really euphoric moments. And I like that push and pull of like throughout a project, you have those tension moments that really release into something beautiful. And for me, it was the first time, speaking as a producer, the first time I really allowed myself to step away from like fully being in the box and really focus on like, are these good songs on a guitar with nothing else?
Yeah.
And if it's not, I got some work to do, And so I think I've always approached things like production first. And in this sense, I really wanted to approach it song first. So I think that's the biggest change in my process with this project. And there were a lot of songs that just really came together super fast. But then there were other songs that took 3-4 years, Varnish being one of them, like took forever to finish. But I think I hope they all fit really well together and fit cohesively, because I think it was a challenge to really like focus on the songs first for me, because I tend to be that like sonically driven person.
Wow. That's honestly beautiful to hear like all of that, of how that was made. Because like I've listened to the songs on the album and it's like I kind of like draw my own conclusions of like what they're about and stuff. But hearing you like explain like the whole process and the overall like meaning of it, I think it's really cool. And I'm glad that I know that now, because I'm gonna go listen to it again and totally see it in a different light now too. But it's a very well produced and well written album for sure. I think I told you Entropy is my favorite one out of them all. There's just something about that one that just like, I don't know, it really like resonates with me, I guess. But that's definitely really interesting hearing that like some songs were done in New York and then you took like a year and a bit and then finished them in LA and then like kind of switch back and forth. It kind of shows like the process isn't always that easy sometimes. It's not like night and day songs are done. It's like it can take a while to like let these songs marinate to become like a fully produced record that's finished.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. And I struggled with a lot of them. And I think that's the point of art, is like you have to struggle with it to, sometimes things come out easily. But for me, the songs that came out easily were because maybe I struggled before I started writing the song and like had processed that struggle. And so like I'm thinking about the Without You, which is the song about, that person in my family who passed unexpectedly. And for me, I was like, I had processed a lot of that grief before I came to the music, and it just flowed out. I remember it flowed out in one take, the initial like piano version of that. And the production went super quick. But on songs where I was still like struggling with some things, like it took a while to work through those. And I think that just from a technical process, like, it takes time. And sometimes, to what we were speaking about before, it's like you have to scrap whole versions of things because it's like you're just too in it and you need a fresh perspective. And sometimes you just got to leave it alone for like a year and just see what happens. Live, as you were saying, live your life, like go out, live your life, process the song, come back to it with less, I think sometimes less myopic focus, at least speaking for myself.
For sure. Especially too, like when you're people like us who take on like multiple roles of stuff too, it's hard, especially when it's your own music, to just stay in one lane. Because like if you're thinking about like writing, then you're gonna think about something production, and then you're gonna think the mix is muddy, and then like it's kind of just like just chill out, just go live life for a minute, then come back. Because sometimes you can drive yourself crazy trying to make everything perfect when it's your own art. Because I feel like a lot of people know this too. It's like everyone's like their own worst critic. So you're going to see the song totally different than someone else's. And I think another important thing in music too is if you're making your own music, to send it to people who also make music that you trust as well. Or send it to your friends who have no idea what music is. And if they like it, then it helps you get a little bit more clarity on if your music's actually good or not.
Yeah. And for me, I send things to my parents because they will just tell me straight up if they don't get it, which is fine. Sometimes, I'm not writing music necessarily for my parents to get, but though, I've had moments with my dad, for example, where I sent him a song for my first EP and he was like, why does it sound like you're just whispering? I know you can sing differently than that. And he said it really directly, but I was also like, yeah, maybe I'm just a little scared of really going there. I share my music with my partner a lot. She also pushes me, where it's like, I think you can do better than this. I think you can go deeper. And I think having people that you trust to be real with you is so important as an artist.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just have people that are going to tell you it's amazing and not give you that real feedback because you're not going to grow that way,
Exactly. Yeah. Question I like to ask is, the music you listen to and your musical influences, do you think that reflects the type of music you make, or do you think it's different?
I think it's a little bit of both. The way I listen to music is maybe a little weird, but I don't know, tell me if I'm speaking your language here, but I kind of see some things as like homework when I listen to music. And I think that's part of just like me trying to always like sharpen the knife of my skills is like, how do I really deeply listen to music? And then there's music that like I just love. I grew up listening to a lot of Zeppelin and Hendrix and bands like that where I'm like, the recording technology was differently. So they did incredible things still to this day. It's incredible, but for the time especially, where I think those influences come out in the sense of like, I love the rawness of those artists and like the rawness that the recording process required. I think in terms of genre, like I hope my influences come across, but like I listen to everything. And, I would say I'm a little influenced by all types of music. My core influences would be that more like experimental pop, left field pop, alt pop kind of stuff. I think there's something like I could point to a band like Passion Pit that I listened to a ton in college. They were like my favorite band. I was obsessed with them. And they have a reputation, I don't think necessarily fairly, but I think if you're being like quote unquote perfectionist about it, their mixes aren't necessarily the best. I don't agree with that because I think that their mixes add to the vibe of the records. They're just fun and dancey and chaotic, but it's because they're good songs. And I think for me, the influence there is like write good songs, have the production and the mix fit the vibe. It doesn't need to be perfect. And so I hope my influences come out that way. But in terms of genre influences, like for me, it's really just blending as much as possible. And I think my influences direct me to do that. Like they direct me to pull from different sources. I'll be listening to like Bjork 1 minute, and then I'll be listening to Bon Iver or Moses Sumney. And like, that's all the experimental stuff. But then I'll throw on like Sabrina Carpenter and just be like, this is a great pop song, also incredibly well produced. Or I'll throw on Joni Mitchell or the Beatles because I'm like, I want to, feel connected to my mom and things like that. So just trying to pull from everywhere.
No, that's really cool. I've talked about this before too. It also like as a producer, it makes you a better producer. The more like genres you listen to and stuff, like you, especially in pop music, you can start pulling influences from everyone that you listen to and everything that you listen to. Like using, like for example, like in a Beatles song, like listening to that production and taking some elements from that and then using that in like, I don't know, like an Afrobeat song, just really mixing it up and making it different, but using your ears and using like your critical listening to see why some melodies are more catchy than others, to see the like rhythmic choices that are being used. It's like the more music you listen to and the more genres you kind of experiment in, like I feel like you're kind of building yourself up as a producer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think it's important to like understand the history of music and understand what different genres are out there and like push your own tastes so that you can help artists push their sound. But the most important thing is really just like trusting your taste, trusting your gut. And for me, that manifests when I really feel like I'm on top of like listening to a lot of music constantly. Because there have been phases for me where I've just avoided listening to music because I'm doing it all day. And that's that's for me like a privilege and something I've worked really hard for. But I never want to lose that like sense of listening to music for enjoyment, but also the critical listening that I think is necessary to be a really good producer.
Yeah. It's hard to separate both and learn when to stop with both. But like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like back to what I said, you got to go live life a little bit. I feel like that's the solution to everything, is just live your life a little bit whenever things are getting like a little too like hard, or you're getting stressed out over music and stuff. Like I remember there's been times where I've been stressed at night because I'm wondering if like my snare got enough compression or whatever. And I'm like, you need to chill the fuck out. I'm like, you need to go like touch grass or do something, because that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's when you know you need to like kind of just settle down a little bit and go live your life. And then you're going to come back with a clear brain and be better at it.
Yeah. And I think you hear all the time about artists who kind of have those moments for themselves where like, you know, they're doing their music and moving through the world and they're so focused on that. And then, you know, they get burnt out, get stressed out. And then I hear stories all the time of artists who are like, I went to a club and just danced my ass off. And I'm like, oh, that's what I need. I just need to make a dance song. Or like I went home and spent time with my family and heard a lot of country music and I'm just going to make a country song because that's what feels freeing. And it's like, maybe you end up going that direction, or maybe it's just a one-off kind of thing. But, you know, I think to your point, living life is important, and being able to like have the perspective of not everything needs to be under such tight control is a skill that all creatives, I think, can benefit from.
To kind of get into like a little bit more like the nerdy side of things now, I'm going to ask you a bunch of engineering questions. Why don't you share like your recording setup?
So I primarily, you know, I'm sitting at my desk now, primarily working in MIDI. You can't see them, but I have a bunch of guitars and basses and shakers and random little instruments. I have like a kazoo, I think, somewhere under my desk.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And, you know, so I work off of Keylab 61 just for my MIDI. You know, I always keep a mic here, hot, ready to go. And that's just, if I have an idea or if an artist has an idea, I never want to like wait to have something get recorded. It's like, let's just get the idea down and not lose it. Under here, you can't see it, but kind of like a audio chaos pad. It does like a lot of, I use it for like a lot of synthy kind of things where I want some like glitchy stuff. And then I have a Rolly C board, and I use that a lot for like experimental tones, ambient kind of stuff, synthy things. I really like it because it has articulations in between the standard 12 keys. So you can slide up and down, you know, and that gives you a really good like human kind of feel.
Yeah.
Kind of like a guitar where you can kind of slide up and you get those microtones. That's what I get from this.
That's cool.
And you can automate it. So I love it. It's such a great tool. Like you can automate it so that when you push up on the keys, physically like up, you can have certain envelopes open, or you can have filters and kind of do more human things with that. So I really love that.
Yeah.
I work out of Logic and I record through my Apollo. Working towards getting some outboard gear at some point. But, you know, for me, I love the UAD stuff. I love the Wave stuff. I find that recording through console, the Apollo console, is just really great. I think it's seamless and fun, offers a lot of control.
I think that's really underrated too, is a lot of people don't use the console. As soon as I finally figured out how to like use it and what it does and all the features in it, I never stopped using it. Because I hear that people say is like, how do I get the plugins with the least latency or any of that stuff? And I'm like, use console. Like I've never had to worry about latency because I monitor everything through console. Everything I'm hearing when I'm recording is going straight through console into my DAW without any latency. And I think it's a really versatile.
Yeah, it's super cool. And like the ability to just bring your Apollo to any session and plug it in and just have all those plugins loaded, ready to go is such a cool, as you said, it's a versatile tool. And I think the latency thing is so important because like, again, my philosophy is like, how do you make it the most seamless experience for the artist so they can just create? And like having latency in the headphones can just be such a killer for someone where it's like, I only can hear myself a millisecond later and it's blowing my my high right now on this track.
Yeah.
And you kind of, the last thing you want to do is be able to have to sit there and figure out like, where is this latency coming from? It's like, nope, I got it all set. We're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I record in Logic, record in Pro Tools. I mostly mix in Logic, although I have been moving towards Luna here and there because I think that, again, just the seamlessness of like the universal audio ecosystem. It's great, and Luna I think just makes things sound really cool right out of the box because it is emulating that analog stuff. So I experiment with that, but I'd say like 95% of what I do is in the box with Logic.
That's awesome. Yeah. Everyone on this podcast knows I'm a Logic guy. And the last episode, I swear I was talking about UAD stuff for like 30 minutes. So we won't go too in depth in that because I can go on and on about UAD and stuff. But
yeah, same.
Yeah, I just fucking sponsor this podcast. Like I love them. I've talked about them in every single podcast I've done. I'm like, UAD, I love you. Like that's
UAD,
all. But
this is
please.
The official recommendation, UAD. Give Nathan a sponsorship.
Thank you so much for that. And a satellite because I can't use any of their plugins without.
Yeah, if I see that little pop-up that says, would you like to learn about managing DSP resources one more time, I'm gonna throw my computer out the window.
To tie in like back into your production, a question I like to ask too is like, where do you find yourself like starting off? Like with drums, with chords, melodies?
Wherever you need to start.
Mm-hmm.
It's different every time. Depending on like, if we're coming into a session and we're working on something from scratch, like there's no demo already, I think a lot of the times I'm like, let's just give me a vibe and let's just try to find something that feels good in that vibe. So maybe it's like, we want to do something dreamy. Okay, cool. Let me pull up some synth patches and let's just find a sound that sounds cool and then we'll play around.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, the artist comes in and they're like, I just want to feel something groovy right now. Let's just kind of do something like that. Cool. I'll pull up some drums. We'll find the right tempo and we'll just start working with that kind of beat. Because I think there's something to be said about like getting the body moving a little bit, getting that feeling of like, we're kind of in that rhythm. I think, I say this all the time, but like rhythm is the most, I think, primal thing that we feel in music. And like, yes, there's ambient music and that's a wonderful, important part of the industry. And I love ambient music, but I feel like the backbone is really that rhythm. And that's the thing that when we were, living in caves, it's like we're hitting stuff and like we feel that instinctually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a good place to start. But if the song already exists, if they come in with a demo or they send me the demo and I'm working on it on my own, I think mostly I go to drums, but I think I like to sit with the song for a long time and really understand like what are the points of the song that need to be emphasized and like what's that arc and like how do we want to portray that arc. So sometimes it is like, well, I'm hearing like this big guitar section under the chorus, so let's just get that done because I have the idea. So it really it's context dependent, but I don't think you can ever go wrong with drums.
Yeah, that's typically where I start is I do drums and stuff, but I do like to switch it up because sometimes, like you said, it's like you're just feeling a certain area of the song that you think is strong. So then I'll start off with chords based on how I'm feeling. And then that leads into me doing drums or me doing bass or finding little like percussion loops and melodies to play with. But yeah, no, that's definitely, I like to ask people that because it helps also learning like different techniques and styles of like where to maybe start on my next production, just like test it out or because everyone has different ways of doing things. And I think it's cool kind of seeing that.
Yeah, totally. And I think like, again, in moments where we're building from scratch, it's really cool when I'm working with an artist and they're like, I'm just put something down. I'm going to write, you build the beat. I'm going to sit back here and just kind of come up with some stuff. And like getting that loop that feels really good and you could just keep listening to that loop forever, I think is always a good sign to me of like you're onto something. And then when the artist comes back in and they just have a killer melody over that, it's like the best.
Yeah. And then you get in and you're like, record that. And then one thing leads to another, then it's on Spotify. And then it's just, it's great. It's like, that's moments like that are always super special and super cool.
And I think too, one thing I always do just kind of as a matter of principle is like, if there is percussion in the song, once we have a layer of, the basics down, like you have a good kind of basic track and vocals recorded, I will mute everything except the percussion and the vocals and I'll listen through the whole song. And if that's flowing and I feel myself moving to it and it's feeling tight and good, the standpoint of the vocals are working in conjunction with the percussion, that's when I'm like, okay, we're in great shape here, and everything else is accoutrement. Like I'll start pulling things back in. Maybe I'll be like, okay, this isn't necessary to have 16 guitar layers. Connor, let's mute some of those,
Yeah.
But for me, it's like always just making sure the rhythm is working in conjunction with the melody and the vocal performance.
Yeah,
like
that's one of my favorite parts, honestly, of like mixing is like when you get to like separate the drums and the bass and then the vocal and just hearing like all the vocals in the song with the drums and just hearing the rhythm of it all. Like I think that's, like you said, it's like a way to test if like the song is performing good as just a song rather than the production as a whole. If it's going well with the melody and or going well with the rhythm and really flowing into it. I think that's cool.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Instead of like, so this is just funny, but it's like, instead of releasing acapellas, we need to release like drums and vocal. Like that's it. That should be like a new thing is like drum and vocal together.
Love it.
Yeah. To kind of get into like the favorites of things now, I like to ask you, like, what are your favorite plugins or like VSTs or EQs, compressors? Give us everything.
I've been really into for a long time the Slate Anna 2 and all of the like.
Is that like the virtual mix rack and stuff and all that stuff?
That one, I like the virtual mix rack. That one is the synth VST that they have, and it has a bunch of different like add-ons and packs, and I love it. I use it on like 90% of what I work on, and I like it because it sounds great with the presets, but then it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of adjusting parameters on the synth. So for me, it's like I get bored easily. So I think for me, being able to like have a really good bass sound, not like a bass instrument, but like the bass of the sound, the core of it, and then being able to manipulate that is so important for me. So I love the Anna 2 bundle. I've been really into this plugin called Sky Keys.
I use that. That's what the base of like all my productions are off of them. I love their keys.
They were great. I totally got influenced by an Instagram ad and was
Same.
like, wow. Yeah.
And it worked. Like they're great.
Sky Keys is doing something right. Definitely anxious to see if they put more stuff out in the future because I really like it. I used to use Alchemy, just built-in Logic Alchemy. And I would say Anna is like Alchemy plus. Like it's kind of an extension of that in my mind. I mentioned the UAD stuff. Like I use the Sound Studio's Room emulator on everything. I love their 1176. I love their Pultec. VSTs. I use Contact a lot. I use the 40 drums. I use a lot of their orchestral, a lot of Spitfire audio stuff. I should definitely shout them out.
Yeah, I have a couple of, I think I have their soft piano I really like.
Yeah, the lab stuff, the soft piano. But then I've splurged on a lot of their like orchestral composing stuff. The Solstice plugin is really good. I like the Farlight plugin. So a lot of I try to bring a lot of like orchestral cinematic sensibilities into what I do. And so eventually I was like, well, I should get some cinematic plugins, and maybe they're supposed to be used for scoring films, but I use them in pop music. And
I think that's cool. Awesome. I think I think that especially too, like I find like in a lot of like singer-songwriter like indie pop songs, like there's a lot of cinematic features, especially in ballads. Like there's a lot of cinematic elements going into songs like that. And I think it really helps drive that emotion that is needed in a ballad compared to if it's just a piano. It's like, but if you're having like these like big drums and these big cymbals and mallets and everything going on in the background, I think that could really elevate the production of it and help that feeling become more like pronounced in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I could geek out on like cinematic production for hours.
Yeah. It's a really interesting craft. Like it's something I'm trying to get better in, especially like with like strings and all that stuff too. Just like the idea of creating a song with like a orchestra, like that to me sounds so, or like with a choir, like that sounds so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like my dream to record, a symphony orchestra at like Skywalker Ranch or something like that,
Yeah. No, that's awesome. What would be your favorite EQ if you had to pick one?
I use Pro Q 3 on.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. You can't beat FabFilter with that, but yeah. I mean, the stock Pro Tools one, also fantastic. Just really does the job well. If I'm using non-graphic EQs, I really like the Pultec stuff, as I mentioned before. I think, again, like you can just put that on anything and it's going to sound better. I'm in a phase of trying to not use graphic EQs whenever I can because I'm really trying to focus on what I'm hearing versus what I'm seeing. But I think that the Pro Q3 is just, it's so good for making really quick informed decisions, especially in the low end. If like you're finding that bass and kick or like some things in the low end are competing, just being able to see like the kick is here against where the bass is and have that kind of referenced within one UI is just so great. Cause I'm like, okay, it's at 100. Okay, we're going to pull the bass down at 100. Issue fixed. 99% of the time.
Yeah, that honestly helped me learn EQ so much better when I could see it like that. To the point now where I am in my engineering journey, it's like I can go onto like a channel strip that just has knobs with it and be able to pull it because I've seen it physically on another plugin that now I'm able to actually like use my ears and listen and know where to tweak things and where to like tweak frequencies. And I think that honestly all just comes like with practice and really like understanding it. And FabFilter is great at doing that too. Like the whole analyzer is just like perfect.
Yeah, it's so good. I'll sometimes use it for like referencing balances on full mixes. Like if I'm mixing or mastering something, being able to pull in a reference track in a similar style or genre and being like, okay, like how am I doing? I'm not going to just make decisions based on that, but I will be like, am I in the ballpark? You know?
Yeah.
Still trusting my own ear, but it's like, is something wildly off? Well, if that's the case, like, is that adding to the song or not?
Yeah.
But I also love the Waves SSL channel strip, like so good.
I use that one too a lot.
The just fantastic tone emulation on that too.
What about compressors? Because I know there's a lot of them for a lot of different things.
Yeah, compression's fun, honestly. Once I finally understood it.
Seriously, it's like once you understand how to use it fully and like what it's actually doing, you're like, okay.
Yeah, and honestly, like I'm sure you've encountered this too. Like a lot of the times I'll get something where I'm, mixing something and I'll ask the artist to send me the project file. And like 50% of the time, all I'm doing is just taking their compression off. And they're like, man, this sounds so good. What'd you do? I'm like, yeah, just compression stuff,
Yeah. Seriously. It's like, oh my God, my vocal sounds so much more clear. It's like, it's a compressor.
Yeah.
Like that's all it is. But
and that's okay because compression is hard to learn sometimes. So
yeah, it took me a while to learn it. I will say to anyone listening or watching, one of the best compressors, honestly, I think to learn that would be, I love RComp. RComp is such like a universal compressor where it's like, there's attack, release, threshold, ratio. And you could see it happening too. Like you can see how much gain reduction you're getting and then you can use the makeup gain on it. You can really control it. And it's like visually, it's a really easy compressor to kind of learn how to use. I would say that one. Yeah, that one or the LA2A, I think, because there's only two knobs and it's easy to see how much gain reduction you're getting and adding back your gain. But if you kind of want to understand a little more like attack and release time, like I think those ones, the RComp's really good.
Totally agree. And I think for me, like speaking of the LA2A, like for a while, I was using that on every vocal because I love that like really gritty sound you can get with it. But I've gravitated much more now towards using the 1176.
Yeah.
I think I resisted it for a while because I was like, man, I don't want to be someone else using the 1176. But I'm like, no, it's great. It's great on vocals. Plugin. Yeah. No reason to be a, snob about it. It sounds fantastic. I use the CL1B on quite a lot, but I do hesitate to use it in certain situations because it can be very affected in terms of the tone. I use the Fairchild. Usually I'll just throw a Fairchild on the vocal, not even like activating any compression because I feel like it just, I could be wrong.
The tone of that one is so nice. It's so warm and like buttery. Like that one's great.
It's just silky. And I feel like when you put it on in most scenarios, you just slap it on and it doesn't have anything on it, no compression or anything. It just pushes the vocal forward a little bit. But I find the Fairchild to be really, really great on guitar buses or anything where you just want a little bit more of that like silky mid-range.
Ooh, I've never tried that. I'm going to now.
Yeah, it's great. I use an API bus compressor a lot. The API 2500, really great. RVox. Yeah, I use all sorts of different compressors. I got really heavy into using the distressor for a long time. I still love it, but you got to be either really tasteful or really just chaotic with it. I don't, for that one, I'm like, there's no middle ground for that with me, at least. I like to either use it incredibly transparently, or I like to just slam the hell out of it and do something a little crazy.
That's funny. That's the only plugin you mentioned that I like haven't used yet still. And I know it's a really popular one, but I don't know. I just haven't found that one. I don't have it, but also like I haven't found like the need for it. Cause isn't it like it's very upfront, right? Like it's a very upfront, especially on a vocal, like we'll put it right in your face.
Yeah. It's very upfront. It has a lot of color. And so I tend to use it in situations where like, if I'm doing something that's maybe a little bit more like emo or punk or that kind of industrial influence, like I'll put it on some stuff. Or if I'm just like, I really want something to pop in a mix, sometimes I'll just put the distressor on it and see what happens. A lot of the time, because it goes up to, I think, either 10 or 20 to 1 ratio.
Yeah, like I've seen the controls of it like a little bit because I know it's like, it's pretty aggressive.
It's pretty aggressive. Yeah. So for me, it's just really like being as tasteful with it as possible, but you don't have to be, that's just my style. Like you can be as crazy with compression as you want. That's how you got Nirvana, So
yeah. Another question I love to ask is like technique wise, like what was a technique that you learned that like you think everyone should know that really changed your life and changed your perspective on things?
That's such a great question. Wow. It's maybe not necessarily a technique, but it is like a principle, is using space and using silence.
Yes. I didn't even think about that, but 1,000. Yeah, I agree with you.
It's hard. It's really hard because I feel like as producers, it's so easy to fall in the trap of like, I want to fill every space and I want to, even for me, sometimes I'm like ego wise, it's like, I try to take my ego out as much as possible, but I'm like, sometimes I have this really cool idea and I want to make it work, but it's forcing it. And learning that restraint, I'm not perfect at it, but learning the restraint of like, maybe we just need a silence here. Maybe that's going to be more impactful. Or in terms of space, technique wise and like as a principle, learning like proper placement of panning does like 90% of the work for you in terms of creating a vibe and creating like the soul of a record outside of the song itself. Like I think having proper panning and having proper usage of the space in sonics, and I think it's going to be even more important as we continue to move into the realm of like Atmos and more of these like 3D kind of mixing techniques, to be able to like perceive space, especially with vocals. It's the thing that I think I have had to learn the most about and get really, really intentional about how I do things, because like you can get so cluttered so fast if you don't put things in the right place. And so I would say like just anybody out there who's listening who is like a producer who's trying to learn or just getting into this or something, like really just focus on the basics of like good panning, good EQ, good compression. Like those 3 things technique wise, I think are the most important for me. I'm not doing anything like, super revolutionary from a recording standpoint. It's just being really, I keep saying tasteful, but it's, it's being intentional, I think is a better word with how you use those 3 very basic things, but very important things.
Yeah, for sure. Even like to throw in there too, like even reverb too, sometimes is super like important in that, because like, for example, like my percussion stuff, like a lot of the time I'll put on, I don't know if you've ever used Brower Motion before, but it's like a spatial plugin. And you can really like place the percussion in certain areas of like the stereo field. And like I'll put them like in the very back. So it's like behind your head. And then with certain reverbs, like it's like really far out there, that in a part of the song where it's like a verse, it's like, it's creating movement and rhythm without actually being like directly in the main center, if that makes sense. Yeah. And just really like playing around with your space and not being afraid to like take risks with it either. I think that's also like really important. To kind of wrap things up for this episode, for anyone out there that's just getting into music or is like well seasoned in it, like what's a piece of advice you'd like to give them?
I think take the pressure off. Honestly, this industry is so crazy in terms of it's completely unregulated and there's a lot of concentration of things at the top. And we talked a little bit about how like things are getting democratized in terms of like access to good recording equipment and more consumer price points and things like that, ability to record at home. But I think a lot of it is just like taking the pressure off yourself to be perfect or taking the pressure off of yourself to be the best. Having drive is important. I think having drive is like different than keeping pressure on yourself. But I like to strike a balance of really challenging myself, really continuing to be a student. And maybe that's a better way of saying it, is like take the pressure off of yourself by continually being a student of this industry and of being a producer or being a mixing engineer. Knowing for myself, like we will all have plateau moments where you get into a habit, you get into a rhythm, and you need to break out of that sometimes. So that's why I'm continuing to go back to books, reading about what other producers do, reading about history of producing or just the industry in general. And, because I think when we put so much pressure on ourselves, that's when you can burn out, and that's when you can lose the thread a little bit of like why you're doing this in the first place. And I'd also say like find what your higher thing you're aiming for in being in music is. Like, is it community? Is it creating community around your music? Is it creating something that moves somebody? Is it helping artists find a voice? Is it helping yourself find a voice in a way that maybe you don't have in your everyday personal life or something like that? I think it's really just about like finding that higher calling for yourself. Maybe you're religious and your music is in service of that. Maybe you're writing love songs and it's in service of deepening your relationship. I think that having a higher calling to all of this is really important, because this industry can focus so much on the vanity of like your streaming numbers and your album sales, your chart placement, things like that. Getting to a place where it's like you just know what your purpose is and that moves you through. And your purpose, at least for me, it can't be about like how many streams do you have.
Yeah, for sure.
That's not moving the needle in terms of like creating. It's, it's nice. It's great to have that feedback, people listening. But I think it's like, you have to care about what they're listening for.
Yeah,
more
exactly.
so than the fact that they are listening.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to care about if you like the music rather than is the person that's going to be listening to this going to like it? Am I going to get streams off of this? Is it like, do you enjoy the music that you're putting out there too?
Totally.
Like, is it authentic to yourself? Is it something that you would put on and play and listen to? Like, if you need to like it before you expect other people to like it, I think.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. You have to like the stuff you're putting out. Rick Rubin always says the audience has to come last.
Yeah.
And I get into a lot of sessions where it's like, do you think people will respond to that? I'm like, well, do you respond to it? I respond to it. Or maybe like, I'm not responding to it, but convince me. Like you really like this idea. Why? Tell me. Maybe I'm wrong. So I think it's like, considering the audience secondary to your own artistic intention is really important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the Record Lab podcast. It was definitely great conversations we've had about production and songwriting and just like concepts in general of how they start and like having to take the time to really like perfect your craft and use all your skills in a way that's going to benefit the song and the record.
Yeah, thanks for having me. As always, like I love chatting music. I love chatting with you. Thanks for creating a space for me to do it.
Yeah, thanks for being on here. And for everyone listening, like I hope everyone here learned something and go out there and make some really cool music. Yeah, thank you guys. Bye guys.
Bye-bye.